Thank you, Etta, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Xi Omega Chapters celebrating our Trailblazers Town Hall. We're excited that you took time to come out to join us this evening for what we promise will be both an inspirational and informative discussion. As president of the first and largest chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in our nation's capital, it brings me great pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of our nearly 700 members. For a century, Xi Omega has exemplified exceptional sisterhood and exemplary service. Two Alpha Kappa Alpha founders were among the 20 visionaries who chartered the chapter in 1923. Through the years, Xi Omega has been home to 3 international presidents, regional officers, and other dynamic Alpha Kappa Alpha leaders. Today, we remain committed to uplifting lives and futures in Washington, D.C., and around the world. We hope that you will be inspired by tonight's trailblazing panelists and moderator, all of whom are members of Xi Omega Chapter. You will hear from the youngest Black woman in Congress, a Marvel film animator from Black Panther, a newly sworn-in D.C. Superior Court judge, and one of the first African Americans to serve as canon of worship at the National Cathedral. This discussion will be moderated by the anchor of the #1 morning news in Washington, D.C. So what is a trailblazer? A trailblazer is the first to leave a mark, leaving a path through the unknown. Please enjoy the lively discussion with our trailblazers and consider blazing a trail of your own. Thank you again for coming out tonight, and please enjoy the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Hill. And again, thank you all for coming out this evening. I hope you have had a chance to look at the pop-up displays that are available to or outside the door. One was done by the Women's History Museum, and they have some interactive activities. If you had a chance to engage in those, I hope you enjoyed that. And then we have a display set up by the great niece of Soror Dorothy Farabee, also outside the room. And of course, we want to thank the DC Library for allowing us to house our exhibit here for over 6 weeks. The exhibit closes on Friday, the 15th, so you still have a few days if you want to spend more time going through our exhibit. Also, when you arrived, you received cards, or you were told that there are index cards that you can write a question for any one of our panelists or for all of them. The important thing to remember is to write your name on it. And we will get to as many of those questions as we can tonight. Tonight, we will present several of our trailblazers. From the beginning in 1923, Xi Omega Chapter has been blazing trails from being the first graduate chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority in Washington, D.C., to the well-documented Mississippi Health Project of the 1930s and 40s, led by our own Dr. Dorothy Farabee, to the awarding of more than $100,000 in scholarships to deserving students this year. We also have many history makers, such as the Legacy Trailblazers that you met earlier, and tonight we present 4 more amazing women. In the words of Vice President Kamala Harris, who is also a member of this great sorority, she says, "I may be the first African American vice president, but I don't want to be the last." And that's the story of our trailblazers, and that's why they are here tonight. So it is my pleasure now to present to you the moderator for our conversation tonight. She is a member of Xi Omega Chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and the Channel 4 news anchor. She is our own Sora Jumi Olabanji Sands. I was trying to find out where you were. Okay. All right, please welcome her. Good evening, everyone.
Okay, there we go. Hello, good evening. So wonderful to see all of your beautiful faces this evening. As you've heard, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and Xi Omega chapter specifically are full of amazing trailblazing women, and you are going to meet some of them this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to do their introductions and welcome them up. First up, Kendra Davis Briggs, nominated by President Joseph R. Biden Jr. to be an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, and then confirmed by the U.S. Senate and sworn in on January 17th, 2023, a date we will all remember. Judge Briggs received degrees from Florida A&M University, Florida State University, and her Juris Doctor degree from the University of Miami School of Law. Immediately prior to her appointment as an associate judge, Judge Briggs served as an assistant United States attorney for the District of Columbia, prosecuting civil rights, fraud, public corruption, and other violent crimes. Judge Briggs also served as the 5th District Community Prosecutor, focusing on building bonds of trust between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the community. Please welcome Judge Kendra Briggs. Next up, and I want to get the title right, the Reverend Canon Dr. Did I get them all in a row? Rosemarie Logan Duncan, who joined the National Cathedral as its canon for worship in May of 2016. A native Washingtonian and a cradle Episcopalian, she previously served as associate rector at St. Columba's Episcopal Church for 11 years. She holds a bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree from Howard University, and a Master of Divinity and Doctor of Ministry from Virginia Theological Seminary. Before she was ordained to the priesthood in 2006, she was a church musician, a clinical psychologist for DC General Hospital, and the DC Department of Mental Health Services. Please welcome Reverend Canon Dr. Rosemarie Duncan. Please welcome to the stage as well Anidra Edwards, a talented editor with more than 14 years of experience in VFX and picture editing for film and TV. She's experienced in both scripted and non-scripted content and has worked for several of the world's biggest entertainment companies. We're talking Marvel, Netflix, HBO, BET, Nat Geo, Walt Disney, ABC, the list goes on. She is also the VFX editor for Paramount Pictures' feature film Transformers: Rise of the Beast that came out this summer. Please go see it. And she also served as VFX editor for Marvel's highly anticipated sequel, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, directed by Ryan Coogler. That movie was Oscar nominated for Best Achievement in Visual Effects, along with 40 other wins and 145 award nominations. She is a graduate of both Dickinson College and American University. Please welcome Anidra Edwards. And finally, I saw her sneak in very busy down Pennsylvania Avenue. We thought maybe she'd be running a little bit late, just got back from recess, but she is here on time. Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, who serves Illinois' 14th Congressional District and was first sworn into Congress on January 3rd, 2019. She is the first woman, person of color, and first millennial to represent her community in Congress. Representative Underwood is a registered nurse and co-founder and also co-chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, which addresses America's Black maternal health crisis in Congress. Prior to her election to Congress, she served as senior advisor to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, helping communities across the country prevent, prepare for, and respond to disasters and public health emergencies. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan and Johns Hopkins University. Please welcome Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. Okay, so this is going to be a conversation. I have some questions, but some of you have given questions as well. And if you have any other questions, please raise your hand, and one of our Xi Omega members will bring you a card so we can keep the conversation flowing. But first, I guess, and we can just kind of go down the line. We know you're trailblazers, and I know it might be hard to talk about yourself, but we have to do it, right? So if we can start with you, Judge Briggs, how do you accept your role as a trailblazer, and how are you trying to blaze the trail for others behind you?
It's hard. So it's been since January, and I am still not used to being not called Kendra anymore. It's always Judge or Your Honor, and sometimes I look around, I'm like, oh, that's me. So it's interesting when Etta called and asked me to sit on this panel. I was like, trailblazer, me? Because it still hasn't sank in yet. I've been striving for this goal for such a long time, and to finally be appointed to the bench is still, I think, taking a minute to realize that I achieved a goal. You set goals, and sometimes you achieve them, sometimes you don't. And when you do achieve them, it takes a minute for you to realize, like, wait a minute, I can put a check mark, next to that. And so it is great to be a trailblazer. It is still hard adjusting to being called a trailblazer. And the way I plan to blaze trails is there are people like me. I tell people all the time, I started strong and I finished strong. Everything else in the middle was a lot. So I was valedictorian of my kindergarten class. And I graduated with honors from law school. Everything else in between, some of it was good, some of it was just okay. So I want to be able to give people the opportunity that I was given. Everybody doesn't get to do a clerkship for a judge. Some people only look for students from certain schools who have certain GPAs, who are on law review, are on moot court. I have taken the opportunity, it is my commitment during my time on the bench to give people who don't normally get the opportunity to clerk to be able to put a clerkship on their resume. And so that's how I plan to further blaze a trail being a judge now.
I must say that I'm still struggling a bit with the trailblazer, but I realized it in May of 2016 when I was called by the bishop to take over the job. And a canon for worship is really the person who oversees, creates, and implements all worship at a cathedral. And so when the bishop asked if I would take on this position, I was a little hesitant, concerned about could I actually do this job. But the former dean of the cathedral, Nathan Baxter, who became a bishop in Pennsylvania, called me and said, Rose, you have to realize you are one of a kind right now. You are the first African-American woman to hold this position at Washington National Cathedral. And there may not be another one like you at another cathedral in the Episcopal Church. And so I realized at that point how important the position was and what my role would be, because the National Cathedral is not just a church for the Diocese of Washington, the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. It's also the church of the presiding bishop. Some of you may know of him. His name's Michael Curry. He did this little wedding thing overseas. So it's actually his church. And then it's also a church of the nation. So we've held important funerals that many of you have seen more recently of President Bush, of John McCain, of Madeleine Albright, of Colin Powell. And so I take this very seriously, the call and what it means as I represent not just Rose Duncan, but it's all the women and men who have come before me, and I hope we'll get to that later, on whose shoulders I stand. Now, in terms of trying to open the doors for others, when I came to the cathedral, I will tell you, I was one of 2 African Americans on the senior staff. There are about 15 people. And over the period of COVID, when we had to downsize, when we realized we needed to rehire, which started last summer, we were very intentional of saying, look, we're dealing with this racial issue of things in this country, but we need to look at ourselves And it became an opportunity to work with the senior staff, with our dean, to say, we need to be looking in new and different places so that we can have qualified candidates who don't look like all of y'all, some of which may look like me. And so that has been an effort, and we're still working at it. We have gained some success in it, but I feel it's really important that in the position that I hold, to exercise that authority and to have that voice at the table.
And Anija, real quick before you speak, I want to, because you might hear VFX editor, what is that? So I want to show everybody what it is that you do so that they can better understand what they hear. So let's take a quick look. So I assume you work with computers, but let us know how you're blazing a trail and also how you're opening the doors for other women and women of color in this industry.
Well, definitely, trailblazing is, to me, a journey. And I stand on the shoulders of so many people to get to the point that I am at now in my career. To me, trailblazing has been within my past. With my first industry job was with BET as a production assistant, and I feel very privileged to have been raised and grown up in these very Black empowerment organizations and departments of film and television, and it helped give me the confidence to go on. As well, I was part of the NBC4 family, and I was a producer, associate producer and editor with them, and NBC4 being a very diverse and very a newsroom where you see a lot of yourself there. And so I feel very proud and privileged to have come from that and to be a native Washingtonian. I was just raised in such an empowering environment, and that helped give me the confidence to go on into grad school where I got my master's in film, and then on to California where I could work on some of the larger productions where quite often I was the only Black woman, person of color, Black person, youngest person on my team, every box. I checked it at one point. Even on Black Panther, people were like, Black Panther, you were one of one in there. I was like, yeah, I was one of one, in my specific department. So trailblazing to me is carrying on the same morals and values that were instilled in me and the work ethic, and continuing to pass that on to other professionals who come into film and TV to help be a mentor to them, as so many people have mentored me and still mentor me.
Well, first, I just want to say I am so excited to be here. I have missed you all so much, and it's such a joy in my spirit to see your faces, including my sorors on this panel. I am just so tickled and delighted. So, being a trailblazer, I certainly didn't set out to be one, and many of you know my story because we just went through it together, and I was interested in serving and trying to find the opportunity to help improve the healthcare of the American people and to end disparities that are impacting our community. That's been what's driven me my whole career, and it just happened to take me to the United States Congress. And I just happened to become the youngest Black woman ever to be elected. But that was not my goal. And I think it's really interesting, right, because Judge Briggs was explicit that this was her goal to serve on the bench. And certainly I was interested in serving in elected office, and I was curious what it would be like to serve in the Congress, but that was not like plotting and planning the whole way for me. I will say, when I think about trailblazing, I think it's really important to consider, at least in elected office, it's one thing to be elected and to have the opportunity to compete. There's a lot of gatekeeping that happens in politics. There's a lot of people who, because of your identity and all the different facets of our identity, we are not considered electable, and then therefore, we are not even considered as a credible candidate, right? So you gotta like break through that, and then once you win, you have to be able to stay. So there's two parts of that, right? There's the part of being effective in your job, and I have a 2-year term, and that goes real quick, especially when you have large national things happening at the same time, like an impeachment, like a pandemic, right? And so you still have to achieve measurable results for your community. That's what they're evaluating you against. So being able to stay, and then also being able to be reelected when those same unique traits that made you a trailblazer are being used to attack by your opponents. You see what I'm saying? And so my commitment moving forward is to help the other young Black women who've been elected, and now there are 2 new ones that have joined us this Congress. Summer Lee from Pittsburgh, she's a Delta, and she is 34, and she's great. She's like squad adjacent, and they're coming after her hard right now. And then there's Amelia Sykes. And Amelia Sykes is 37. I'm 36. That's why I'm telling you their age. She's 37. She's a soror, and she's from Ohio, and she has a very, very, very tough competitive race. They both have these different dynamics, but it has just changed my whole experience in Congress, having them to serve with me. I'm not alone. I'm not isolated. I have peers, true peers, and I'm just committed to helping make sure that they can come back.
So I'm going to go to a question from the audience. This is from Chastity Cooper. This is a question for all, so anyone can answer. What has helped you in challenging times in the pursuit of success and service? Oh, yeah, anyone can jump in. Anyone can jump in.
So for me, I knew that there was a greater goal. And so when there were challenges on this path for me, I always remembered there was a greater goal. And I tell this story, I applied to be a magistrate judge at DC Superior Court in 2017, and I didn't get it. And the reason I applied to be a magistrate judge is because I'm from Florida, if you can tell that by my universities. And in Florida, you run elections to be a judge. And so I had convinced myself in my head, like, oh, I live in DC, I can't run an election, the president doesn't know who I am, how am I gonna get him to know who I am? So I'm never gonna be an associate judge because the president doesn't know who I am. To be a magistrate judge, you apply and the current judges on the court select you. I was not selected. And I remember hearing a sermon years ago that God will sometimes make stuff painful when it's not what he wants you to do. And so that was very painful to me because I'm like, I've done all the things. I make sure that I do what I need to do. I make sure that I'm good at my job, not just good, but great at my job, so that when it was time to apply, my application would be top notch. So I didn't understand, why didn't they pick me? And then I had to sit back and think, and I was like, that was God's way of saying bigger. That's not what I had planned for you. You're going to be an associate judge. The president is going to know you. We will get there. just relax. And that's exactly what happened. So every time I would hit different, that was a big stumbling block. But whenever I would hit roadblocks of me just sometimes convincing myself, imposter syndrome, like, oh, maybe I need to do 2 more years in fraud before I apply. Or maybe I need to go over here and get some narcotics experience before I apply. When I finally got out of my own way and said no now, then I always remembered what the greater goal was. Like, I have to keep moving. Whatever roadblock is coming, I'm ducking and dodging until I get to the goal.
I was going to say, you told part of my story. I would say perseverance and prayer. Because when I was seeking a first call, even out of seminary, it was very difficult because I wanted to stay in this diocese. I grew up here in Washington. And race and gender play a really important part in the church, in the Episcopal Church too, even though people say, oh, you're so liberal. And so many of us who are put forward from African-American parishes, the expectation is you're going to go to a black church when you get out. And many of the African-American churches were not quite ready in 2005 when I came out of seminary to hire a black woman, to hire a woman. And there were many of the white churches were like, well, these black people, I'm not. So both of those things played out. I was lucky in a sense, I was blessed in a sense, to land at St. Columba's that you mentioned, and to be able to stay there 11 years ordained, 2 years in training. But I'll say this, when I realized there was a point in time I felt I needed to move on and to grow past being a senior associate at a church, and I put my name and I was like that place and that place and that place, and none of them happened. And I got close to it. I'd be like one of the last 2. But it was something they weren't quite ready for in some way. So I said that was the perseverance part. And then when the opportunity did arise, because I had been tested in that sense, to realize these weren't the places I was really going to be called to be, and having been prepared, so when the opportunity came, I could say yes. Scared, but I could say yes. And so I think those 2 things in particular, perseverance, being ready, but perseverance and having a strong prayer life.
I will also kind of echo them as well, saying with having God first in my life, that's what I was taught, but also passion. And passion is what gets me through some of my hardest days. The entertainment industry is one of the hardest industries to break into, and especially for myself, I do $200 million films and up, and it's not a lot of us up there. And so for me, and I didn't just move to California and that happened, it was definitely layers to it. But passion, in terms of being a creative person, I usually work 10 to 12-hour days. And so the creativeness and the willingness to be a part of the art and doing it, that's what gets me through a lot of it. And when I mentor from kids to adults, I've also mentored parents who have had a creative child. And I give, congrats to my mother, all the praise, because I was a creative child and embracing all of my interests and all the things that I wanted to do, even if she didn't understand it. And she was learning along the way and really fostering the passion that I have today. And even when I'm in my edit suite or my edit room and I have like 6 or 7 computers in front of me and I can't get something that I'm doing, I go back to my sketch pad and I sketch, because that's what I was doing when I was 10 years old. And that helps me get through, an artistic block I might have, or I switch my pen from my right hand to my left hand, and I start drawing with my left hand to try to get through those blocks. Those are all fundamental skills I learned when I was younger, and that passion feeds me through all the way to today. And so I hope that people also will get out of this trailblazing panel is the passion that we all have in our respective professions and what we do. And that bleeds into my service, the passion that I have for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, in order to show other young people and those above me that there are more roles than just director, actor, producer, writer in the film and television sphere. There are hundreds of jobs that you can do, and I'm just very passionate about sharing that and sharing my experience. So that's a big one that I want to add to that.
The thing I would add is when I talk to particularly either new electeds or young people, I remind them that like no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain yourself. It's okay to just say no. But when people tell me no, I treat it like a comma, right? Because that's not always the end, and we can always find another way to get to where we're going. So that's one thing that I do when I encounter roadblocks, is that I do not just accept it. And that might be a personality flaw, and I will own that. Number two, I think, is we have to know the rules. Because sometimes when people are trying to block us, they make up rules, they make up barriers, they set different standards for us than what other people are being held to. And if we know the rules, then we are given an opportunity to compete on the same field that everybody else is. When we don't know the rules, or we are trying to pay someone or count on someone to advocate on our behalf, then we sometimes, don't get there. And so I just say, whatever it is that you do, be very, very, very confident in the rules of engagement so that you can have the best shot of achieving what you're setting out to do.
Nidra, you kind of touched on it, but I would love to hear from everyone else as well. How has membership in Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Xi Omega chapter, impacted your life, and has it impacted your career success?
For me, that's a definite yes. I moved to DC in 2008, 2 months before I got married. And I joined Xi Omega chapter October of 2008, right after our centennial celebration. So I've been a member of Xi Omega chapter longer than any other chapter that I've been a member of. And coming to DC not knowing anybody here, I literally moved here for my husband, but my mentor, her line sister, Norma Jean Johnson, was a member of Xi Omega chapter. And so when I moved to DC, she was like, okay, so the first chapter meeting they have, you will be going to Xi Omega's chapter meeting so that you can find a chapter home, because she was very adamant that I find a chapter home as soon as I got here, because she knew I knew nobody. And so while I didn't join until the end of the year, because that's when I could transfer, but I went to I believe it was the April or May chapter meeting in 2008, and they were all geared up for the centennial. Everybody was focused on the centennial, but everybody was very welcoming. And so very quickly in my transition into DC, I found a home in Xi Omega chapter, and that made me learn so much about the city. I am not the first person to sit on the bench in Xi Omega chapter for DC Superior Court. Fern Sadler is a member of Xi Omega chapter, and Lori Parker is also a member of Xi Omega chapter. So to immediately see people who had already achieved the goal that I was striving for in Xi Omega chapter was another relief. Okay, so this can really, really happen. There are already people here who have done this. So Xi Omega, another thing that Xi Omega helped me with is I was able to get into leadership very quickly in Xi Omega, and that is not true of all chapters. And I was welcomed into Xi Omega, I was encouraged to lead, and I was able to get into leadership positions which strengthened my bonds in the community, another building block you need to my goal. So Xi Omega has been instrumental in my social life, my professional life, every aspect of my life. I don't think I would be sitting on the bench without the contributions that Xi Omega and members of Xi Omega have made to my life.
So for almost all of my life, I knew about Xi Omega because my mother was initiated at Beta Lambda, which had been Minor Teachers College, and then now it's UDC. One of our cousins had been one of the charter members of Beta Lambda, and then I have all these relatives who are AKAs, and they were part of Xi Omega. And the other person who is really important in that group as well is Marion Tyrants. And Linda and I, she's back there, but Linda and I were in school together. And so I knew about Xi Omega because my mom was going to these meetings all the time. and at one point, I mean, she was, had the key to let people in. But, so, I was ingrained with, so when I was initiated in Xi Omega in 1987, it was probably the greatest joy for my mother and for me to come together in that. But I was surprised as I entered ordained ministry, the number of women of Alpha Kappa Alpha who are Episcopal priests. And a few of them are now the first in these dioceses to be the first African American bishop in a place. And so all along, just being influenced and strengthened and seeing the model of what service is, about what love is, about what care is, about what faith is, all those things form me to the person that I am today. And so I'm very grateful for Xi Omega for initiating me and bringing me into the fold, but also upholding and supporting me all these years as well.
Oh, I was initiated into Xi Omega in 2012, and I was blessed that my sister and my mother were already a part of Xi Omega, so they were part of my process coming into that chapter. And also when my sister first came into Xi Omega as well, she was initiated there. I was a high schooler going to women's and girls conferences of Xi Omega. And so I've had their influence when I was younger. But I want to share a small story with you, just the power of Alpha Kappa Alpha women. When I was working on Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, I actually had to go to Atlanta on behalf of Marvel Studios. And I was stationed at Tyler Perry Studios, where my office was. And I think I was down there for about 4 weeks. This is during the summer of 2021. And I was already down there for a few weeks. And this is kind of still a spring height of the pandemic. And Atlanta was all the way open. Like, it was kind of closed and quarantining, but not. And I'm based in Los Angeles, so I had to fly from LA to Atlanta, and I had some family there, but I didn't know too many people. And as fate would have it, I caught COVID while I was in Atlanta. And at the time when I caught it, I had just moved into a new Airbnb, so I didn't have any groceries. And I didn't have, didn't have anything really to fill the Airbnb. And my mother called one of her high school classmates who was a soror. And I kid you not, a few hours later, I had Costco bags, I had everything at my door, and then she brought me flowers. And it was that small gesture, because I was very isolated. I had to quarantine for 10 days, and I didn't really, quarantining in something that's not your home. And that small gesture, just brightened up my day. And I've just had many a moment like that where Alpha Kappa Alpha women have come through for me, where I'm based in Los Angeles, but I'm currently active in Xi Omega in Washington, D.C. And I have had California sorors who were introduced to me by a Xi Omega soror. I heard about you from such and such, and they told me come right over. I had so many moments like that, and I can't be any more appreciative of that. I had birthday cards sent to me in Atlanta from Xi Omega sorors because they knew I didn't know that many people in Atlanta. And, it was the talk of the town at Tyler Perry Studios. It's like, Anitra got all this mail and it's all like pink envelopes. And so it's very thoughtful, and I just had so many moments in my life when I thought I was maybe by myself, and AKA women came through and sorors came through, and that has the legacy I want to leave to outside of Xi Omega.
I was initiated into Alpha Kappa Alpha as a senior at the University of Michigan after our chapter had 2 back-to-back suspensions. So we didn't have access to our chapter history as much. We didn't have, sorors on campus to get to know. And when I graduated, at the time in Xi Omega chapter, the first and second vice presidents of our chapter were from Beta Eta. One who was the line immediately preceding mine from the 90s. And so that's how I ended up in the chapter, because that was really the only chapter soror that I got to know because of the circumstances of my undergraduate chapter. And so those sorors were Crystal Lander and Celia Washington. And I stayed, and Zao Megasaurs have been so generous in giving me opportunities to lead and serve and tolerating all of my ideas from the Under 30 Network and all that became. And, it's just been just this beautiful place. With respect to my entry into politics, when I got appointed into the Obama administration, there was this really beautiful network of sorors that were active within the chapter, but also fellow appointees. And people were really kind and helpful during a time where, politics, there can be competition, and there just really wasn't here. And it was a safe, comfortable space to be able to navigate DC from. And so I'm just grateful. And so I'm not leaving. Folks in my district feel away. So can I just say this? There's redistricting. So after you do the census, they redraw the maps. My new district has more black folks now. So when I was first elected, the district was less than 3% black, right? So that was, interesting. But now there's more black folks, and there's actual chapters, and I'm not a member of their chapter. And they feel a way about it, but then I tell them about Xi Omega and how long I've been here, and they know the love is real. And so, it's not a political issue or anything like that. But I'm just saying, I'm rocking with Xi Omega hard forever, and people just know it.
Okay, I'm going to take a few more questions from the audience. This one, anonymous, but this one is for Judge Briggs. Are you now in a position that you could one day lead you to the Supreme Court? Smiley face.
Technically, yes. Do I want to be there? I don't know. Yes, I am on, a lot of the Supreme Court justices come from the DC Circuit. I would have to go a couple of more courts up to get there, but technically, yes. I will say my goal and my dream was to be an associate judge. I don't right now have any further aspirations, but you soon learn when you get this position, then they start asking the next question. Like there's a court across the street, the DC Court of Appeals. Do you want to go there? I've been here 6 months. Can I please get used to being on the bench? So yes, technically, but I don't, that is not an aspiration for me right now.
Okay. This one is for Anidra. As an avid comic book and anime fan, I cannot help but notice the sexism in the industry. How do you navigate difficult spaces? And then a second question, who's your favorite character?
Girl, man. It is. Hollywood has a long way to go. It's getting there. But when you are behind the screen, behind the curtain, that is then behind the curtain, we're still slow to get there. There are a lot of my teams, especially in big action movies and big feature, that I'm the only woman on my team, or there may only be one other. And then visual effects, we are a huge department. I'm sure you've seen in films in the credits, some of y'all probably get up, where there's hundreds of names that scroll down, and they're usually with the visual effects vendors that we'll use. These are visual effects companies that we outsource that work to. You might have someone who created a building in Wakanda, and that was that company's only job. And then they give it to me, and then I help put it together, along with several other companies who have created, maybe they created a whale that was in the water or such and such. And so I tell people that you have the vendors, those companies, but then you have kind of this upper tier, which we call ourselves production, where we might be a team of 4 or 5. And that's usually with me. I have maybe a team of 4 or 5 other visual effects editors, and then visual effects producers and supervisors, and that's a general thing of the breakdown. But there is a lot of sexism. I kind of go into it headstrong, and I've been in rooms where comments have been made, not realizing I was there, or they forgot I was there, especially on Transformers. There was a lot of comments that, like you have to remember who the characters are and who's there. And I will stick up for any character that is a Black woman in my films. I look out for them, I protect them. Visual effects, we often clean up the wig lines in films. So anytime someone does a stunt and they go upside down, I'm always looking at their hair, because I'm like, we need to protect that hairline. If I can tell, there's a world of people in IMAX who can see it.
And they will
And
tell
I saw it
you.
on my little screen. So like being there, and when I do get to meet the actors, or I do get to meet the actresses of the films I'm a part of, and I say, hey, I was back there. I want to let you know, I was looking out for you. And the same with, I had the opportunity to talk with Ruth Carter while I was on Wakanda Forever. We were both at Tyler Perry Studios together. And even telling her, like, yeah, I try to make sure we protect the costumes, and I'll ask questions like, is there supposed to be wrinkles here, or is it supposed to fold here? Because we can fix that. And visual effects, we touch all that up. There's so much that's not real when you watch a movie. So I would say that's kind of how I tackle it. You just go head on and understand that you deserve to be there just like anybody else. And wield that confidence. Even if you gotta fake it for a little bit, wield it. And I would say my favorite characters in animation would probably be between the Proud Family, as well as Bebe's Kids is one of my favorite animations too. So I'll have to say between those two animations, and Penny Proud and the Proud Family is probably one of my favorite characters. And then out of what I've worked on, it's definitely been Black Panther, working with Shuri, definitely one of my faves, and Black Lightning, which was one of my shows under Warner Brothers CW network. So those have been some of my favorite characters.
Representative Underwood, I heard another elected official recently at a different panel say this, and it kind of stuck with me. And she said, you can't be a good politician unless you're willing to be an ex-politician.
I think that's right.
Can you talk about that? And you kind of touched on it a little bit before, but what it's like to try to keep your job when
Yes.
there's a chance you could be replaced every 2 years.
Yes.
And how you stay true to who you are.
Yes, ma'am. So I think that we all see people who've let their jobs become their identity. They are slow to let go. They can't imagine a world where they don't have the power or influence. They resort to criminal activity to sustain a lifestyle, right? Like this corruption thing is real. And sometimes, if we can just be really candid, for Black electeds, it doesn't start out that way, right? Like they just, all their friends may have personal wealth. They want to join the country club too. So they put it on their campaign credit card, and turns out they've broken the law, right? Whereas they weren't sitting here trying to necessarily be corrupt, but instead they just stumbled into it, right? And so this is very much a thing. Where I'm from in Illinois, there's this legacy where our governors go to jail. And Illinois is a machine politics state, right? So there's a certain type of elected or party official. One of my former member of my team is here, Jackie's here, and she's like, yes, this is true, Illinois politics. And people wear wires, right? And so it's a thing, right? Like you're making a phone call, seemingly innocuous, and then you can end up in somebody's papers once their case is unsealed. Yes, ma'am, this is like very much a thing where I'm from. And so I've had to grapple with this from the very beginning. And one of the things I said was like, I'm not gonna go to jail to do this job. I'm not gonna mortgage my future, right? Like I'm not gonna go into incredible debt in order to win this election. And there are certain things that I am not willing to do to win. And if you are clear about that and continue to remind yourself about that, I think that it'll just guide you forward. However, I have picked literally the most difficult way to run for office as a Democrat at the congressional level. The type of fundraising support I accept, who I choose to align with. There's the path of least resistance and there's the path of most. I am doing the path of most, which means there's a lower ceiling when you do that, right? Do I have the political talent to be able to stay for decades? I think so. But have I chosen that path? No. So it's like if I'm going to be here for a defined period of time, let's just make the most of it. Because I believe that you can serve and have an impact from every station and position in our community. And so I'm interested in doing the work, not having the title. So I say all that to say, who knows how long I'm gonna be here in the Congress, but it's fun. It's fun for now.
Cannon, if you could, and I know, I was like, what are we using? Reverend, Dr., Cannon, what's the shorthand?
Rose?
Cannon Rose. Can you talk to, the audience and first kind of tell us a little bit more about what you do at the cathedral? And also, in that work, I know it's Episcopalian, but, we see other denominations where maybe there aren't a lot of women, people of color, even though those folks are going to church still. And so how you work to kind of embrace your brothers and sisters in ministry to maybe take a more progressive stance when it comes to who can serve.
So, up front, the Episcopal Church is a predominantly white church. In my position as the canon for worship, it is a sacred trust I have, yes, to uphold the traditions of the Episcopal liturgies in the Episcopal Church. That's a vow I take with the bishop. But it also means that the cathedral is a house of prayer for all people. Now, that's the challenge. And so I feel it is really my challenge as well, personally. And this has been playing out since I arrived at the cathedral in May of 2016. So in conversation with the bishop and with the dean, the new dean who came on, my goal was to work with particularly our music department, because very often don't get me wrong, I love Anglican chant. But let's just say there are a lot of Episcopalians who on their way to church who will get Anglican chant are listening to HUR on the way. So they got themselves straight before they go in for Anglican chant. So I would say the pandemic, in a very crazy way, provided a new opportunity that none of us expected. So when everything shut down, we had just upgraded our video. And for a few Sundays, we were like the show in town. And we suddenly realized we had an opportunity to continue to expand the breadth of music in the African American tradition that fit with our theology.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? The time now is 8:30 p.m. and the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library will be closing in 30 minutes. I repeat, the time now is 8:30 p.m. and the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library will be closing in 30 minutes. Thank you.
My cue to be short. Okay. So we realized, and I realized this early when I was working at my home parish and starting a contemporary choir, that you can use all forms of music and genres, and they can be woven together in a really cohesive whole that gives you a message that resonates with the scripture of the day, the prayers of the day, the events of the world. And so the surprising thing that has happened is that we have people who are watching us around the world. We included Spanish, we included ASL, because we realized, how do we become more inclusive? How do we become more inviting? How do we really say to people, you belong here? This is your cathedral. And so that also means, I know this sounds a little nitty-gritty, but when I'm looking at, okay, who is the presider? Who is the preacher? Who is reading? Who is the gospel? All those things. I'm looking at, okay, who and what do people see? With the idea that they've got to see themselves reflected in some way so that they know, this could be a home for me, for my spirit.
Yeah, amen.
And so that's why I say it's a sacred trust. But I will also say, Lord, it has been some work. So, because into that, and it's like, I don't know, Rose, I don't know if this is the way to go, but more and more, just kind of trusting in the Spirit, the way the Spirit has been leading us, I think that we have seen an opportunity to really live into being a house of prayer for all people.
So being cognizant of the time, if we could just go down and if you could just leave the audience with maybe just a final message or a way to inspire, and then also follow that up with how we can support you.
So the thing I want to leave is I get asked a lot, even before I took the bench, was how did you decide what path to take on your journey? And what I encourage people to do, and remember I told you the middle was a little crazy, started strong, ended strong, but in doing that, what I learned is when it comes to your undergraduate education, and if you have aspirations to be a judge or just even a lawyer, you need to strive to set yourself up to succeed. Meaning, I tell everybody who talks to me about law school, you need to go to law school where you can go for free, period. To me, I came to DC, my University of Miami School of Law degree didn't mean a lot here in DC, and I still made it to the bench. So you can't look at your pursuits at, okay, I have to get this, it has to be this level, and I'm gonna go into $170,000 of debt for law school just so that I can say I went to Yale. But UVA or the University of Maryland or the University of Miami offered me to go for free. And so you can't look at all boxes don't apply to you, if that makes sense. Some people do have to check those boxes, but just like I tell people, it is my job as a trailblazer to allow other people who took my same path to know that you can still get here without checking those boxes. You have to realize is what boxes apply to you and what boxes you can go around. And so don't look at a path to whatever your choice is. For me, it was the law. For me, it was being a judge. But don't look at just a straight path. Sometimes that path is going to wind, and you may go all the way over here on a detour. But you have to always remember what the goal is and figure out a way to get back there. The way you can support me is just pray for me. Just pray. There is, I see the underbelly of this city on a daily basis. And so having to take into account the history of the people standing before me and being able to relate sometimes to that history, which is not always the same. And so treating every person before me as a human, even though they've done some of the most heinous things in this city, but still having to see that person. The one thing that my mentor taught me is that no matter what a defendant has done, when they come before you, say good morning and greet them by their name. Because at the end of the day, they are a human who has made a mistake. And so I have defendants all the time to say, good morning, Judge Briggs, how are you? I'm doing fine, Mr. So-and-so, how are you doing today? Even though I know he's in shackles and just came from the DC jail, just to take those 3 seconds to say, I'm doing fine, how are you today? And even when I'm talking to them and sentencing them to jail, I will say to them, I wish you the best. And I hope that this encounter changes you in some way. And I talk to them about what they did, because a lot of the crimes in DC, I'm on a misdemeanor calendar right now, and a lot of the crimes in DC are mental health related and homelessness related. So a lot of these crimes are done out of what they feel is a necessity. But I have to say to them, the woman you stole her purse, think about what you stole from her. She now feels violated, has to go home, replace her credit cards, replace her ID, replace her jewelry, replace everything you took from her, and you had a moment of gratification. And yes, it may have gotten you off the streets for an hour, but now you've affected her life, and now you're sitting before me, and now your life is affected. So think about that the next time you're in this moment of desperation. Or if I put you on probation, I'm putting you on probation because you say you need housing help. Take it. Do probation. Do the stuff that they're asking you to do. So that's why I say I see a lot in this city, and the only thing you really can do is just pray for me that I continue to empathize with the people in front of me and understand that they are human and they've made a mistake. And that's why they're here, and my job is not to throw them up under the jail and never see them again. I try and leave them with something. Don't always work, but I try.
So it was never my goal to be the canon for worship at Washington National Cathedral. That was something I didn't see coming at all. And so I took a very interesting route to ordained ministry. But what I learned from that, and what I want to share is, learn from every experience that you have. I had no idea that the strange route from a pharmacy school student to psychology and music would lead to this. But all these things really kind of built one upon the other in ways that I didn't expect. And so I say, be a forever learner. Pick up as much as you can. And when I'm working with divinity students and seminarians, I tell them, learn it all. Because when you go to a church, you get to titrate, okay, what kind of church are they? High church? Are they low church? Are they somewhere in between? But learn it all. You can always subtract. It's a lot harder to add when you've gotten the job and people are looking at you to do it. So learn everything, be a forever learner. And one of the things I would say, I stand on a couple of shoulders. Now, Nan Pete, who's a member of Xi Omega, was one of those early African-American women who was ordained in the Episcopal Church. But the other one that I stand on is Pauli Murray. And she was one of the first, she was the first African-American woman who was ordained in the Episcopal Church at Washington National Cathedral in 1977. We won't say anything about the fact that that was, how many years, it was 1802 when the first African-American man was ordained in the Episcopal Church. So you do that math, 1802 to 1977. So I stand on those shoulders and I realize that, and I want to make sure that I support and I mentor all those who come through the cathedral to learn more about how to be a minister, how to be a pastor, how to be someone who cares for those who come to us in those needs as well. Because they see a really big church and they think, wow, they must have some money. So we get a lot of people who are really in need, who really are in need. The way that I would ask that you support me, and you've been doing this already, if you would show up at the cathedral. I want to make sure that, I can't stress this enough, it's your cathedral. So come when you can. I'm not asking you to abandon your church. I am not sheep stealing. But particularly when there are events. And so I'm going to make a plug now. On September the 23rd at 11 a.m. in the morning, we are going to be blessing and dedicating new windows, stained glass windows, that were created by Carrie James Marshall. Now, the history on that real quick is that in 1953, the Daughters of the Confederacy made a deal to put in stained glass windows for Lee and Jackson. And they stayed there from 1953. Now, don't forget, integration hit 1954. I'm not even going to go anymore. So 1953 until 2017, those windows were there. So I had the privilege of writing the deconsecration service so they could go out. But Carrie James Marshall agreed to make new windows for us. And if you know anything about his art is a black people. It shows all of our lives, the celebrations, the sadness, it captures everything. And so he has designed these wonderful, I think going to be inspiring windows when people see them. But they're going to be dedicated, and Elizabeth Alexander has written a poem to accompany them. They will both be there on September 23rd. There are no passes needed for this. It's open to everybody. Come, doors open at 10 o'clock. Seeing you all, that's a way to support me in my ministry in that place. And we're going to have a great time that day.
So what I want to leave you with is, I don't think I gave a very decent explanation of visual effects, even though I've been talking about it. From the video that you saw, visual effects, we take the practical footage that was filmed in camera, and then digitally, visual effects, we add the effects on top of it. So that's why you saw some of the same shots 3 times, to see how we add on top of that. So I want to make sure you all know that. And that when you watch your Little Mermaids or whatever big Disney film comes back, that you will think of those of us who work behind the curtain and know that all those names that you see do have a face, and I'm one of them. So if you can go and support your favorite film or TV show, that always, elates my heart. I always share with Xi Omega any films or TV shows that I have coming out, so that SOARs can know that there is someone there who's from Xi Omega who worked on that. So that's the biggest thing that you can do for me. And then also for those budding creatives or little story writers or whoever, the advice that I also give is to fail fast and fail early. It is okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. You make them and then you never do it again. And so that was the advice that was given to me. And to also trust your instincts and trust your gut. Even to this day, I have to remind myself of that, that your intuition has value, and to lean into that and don't take it for granted and keep that as part of your voice, your creative voice.
I would just encourage you to continue to pursue public service. I think serving is everyone's responsibility. Obviously, it's the core of what we believe as Alpha Kappa Alpha women, but so often we don't see public service or elected office as sort of an extension to that commitment of service to all mankind. And if you are exploring opportunities to run for office and serve, please, similar to what Judge Briggs said, you are good where you are, right? So like you don't need another degree or another title or more money or more press hits or whatever. Don't let that stop you from stepping forward. And I think that Xi Omega has such a rich history and legacy of incredible SOARs who've been elected and serving, and including our great councilwomen who aren't here today, but who are fantastic. And so I know that you have great mentors and references within the chapter to draw upon. And in terms of support, I would just say, please vote. In every election, all the way down the ballot, flip it over. And if you don't know, you can take out your phone and just look. But there is no unimportant position on your ballot. There is no unimportant question on your ballot. And sometimes that is the most powerful thing that you could do that year is go vote. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is so powerful, they try to restrict us in 2023, right? And even here, it happens everywhere. It happens in my district, voter suppression does. And we have, theoretically, all the protections in Illinois. And so please, 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 just do it.
Thank you. If we could just get another round of applause, our amazing panelists, Judge Briggs, Reverend Canon Dr. Duncan, Anitra Edwards, and Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. Thank you so much. And I'm going to invite Ms. Etta back to the stage real quick.
And a round of applause for Miss Jumi. Thank you so much. Wasn't this awesome? I mean, I've just sat there. I couldn't take my eyes or my ears off any of you. Thank you so much for saying yes to the request, and thank you for the inspiring messages that you shared with us. Let me acknowledge the presence of a couple of people. I want to acknowledge the Centennial Chair, Denise Gibson Bailey. She is the General Chair for Xi Omega's 100th anniversary. And where is Diane Johnson, who is the Chair of the Centennial History Committee. And this subcommittee thanks both of them for their support and leadership. And now I think our president would like to say something more.
Well, first, thank you, panelists. I am so inspired by all of you, knowing that I have served on committees with you, that you continue to lead and serve in Xi Omega. Just thank you for all that you continue to do. But I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge a very special group of women. The Xi Omega story began 100 years ago, written by, in large part, 37 women who preceded me as president, and many of them are here this evening. So I would like to take a special privilege to acknowledge first Cheryl Parker, our 28th president. C. Edith Booker, a president and past North Atlantic Regional Director. Vivian L. Smith, who is the region's Pearl Member of the Year. Sharon Anderson. And April Gaines Jernigan. They are my personal trailblazers, so thank you, ladies. And I would also like to thank those hardworking officers and members of Xi Omega who are here tonight, taking time out of their busy schedules to continue to do the work of the chapter. Thank you, ladies.
Just to say thanks again to you for your attendance. The library closes at 9 o'clock, and I think you've been aptly warned. So I just wanted to say again, thank you. I think the food is gone, so you can just walk out the door. But we have about, 10 minutes maybe before we
Yes.
have to leave. So if you want to take pictures or chat with our trailblazers, you have a few minutes to do that.
Yes, and there's some
All right.
centerpieces. The decor team said you can grab them on your way out if you would like a. And cookies?
Cookies,
Okay.
okay. All right,
Centerpieces
so there
and
is
cookies.
food. All
Those are
right.
free. Take them.
All right.
Have a wonderful evening.
Enjoy the evening, and thanks for coming. You're welcome.